Hi everyone and welcome back. So for today's video we're going to take another look at the Simply Cards and Papercraft issue 205. I'm going to show you just another couple of ideas that you can do with the free gifts that came with this month's issue. So I've taken some inspiration from this card here, and you can see that they've used the embossing folder to create this background, and they've just coloured it in using some watercolours. But what I'm actually going to do is use my alcohol markers to colour the background in. So first of all, I'm just going to cut down my white cardstock. So I'm going to cut this down to 5 by 7, and then this will fit perfectly into our embossing folder. So once I've got my cardstock cut down, I just go ahead and pop this through my embossing machine. And now you can see we've got a really nice sort of blank canvas that we can work on. So what I'm going to do is just take a couple of my Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend markers. So I'm going to go obviously still with that tropical green theme. So you can see I've got the citrus green, I've got the light green and the dull green. So all I'm going to do is just follow the design on this card, and I'm just going to colour in the embossed images here. So I'm not doing anything sort of too careful, too perfect. I'm not worried about it being sort of too realistic. I just want to get the colour down just to sort of enhance the images that have been embossed into our cardstock. So I have previously shown you about colouring in your embossing folders, and I'll pop a link to that video up in the corner. I show you lots of different ways that you can use an embossing folder that's come free with one of these magazine issues. But all you can see that I'm doing here is just really basically colouring in this design, like I said, with that single colour. So what I'm going to do afterwards is then just use a darker shade of green just to put some sort of little lines, a little bit of detail back into the image, just again to make it a little bit more interesting and not sort of look too flat. Because the type of colouring I'm doing here is relatively basic, I'm not going to show you sort of too much of me colouring in this design. Like I said, I'm just using a couple of different green shades and sort of just following the pattern that's already laid out for me. So you can see here that we've coloured most of it in. So you can see I've used a combination of sort of the different colours from my Tri-Blend marker. So I've used sort of the light with the medium, I've used the medium with the dark. And it just gives the background just a little bit more variety, just so it's not all sort of the same shade of green. Like I said, I've just sort of put those extra little lines, just that little bit of detail back into the leaves, just to sort of make them pop a little bit more. So like I said, I've done this with a previous embossing folder, and I really love the way it comes out. Depending on your design, it can be a little bit time consuming, but it is sort of a nice little project that you can sort of get on with if perhaps if you're watching the telly or you just want to sort of do something you don't have to think too much about. It is like just doing a basic bit of colouring. But I think it does add something a little bit different to your embossing folder images, and again, it's just another way of using your embossing folders, but in that different way, so you're not always using it just as a standard embossing folder. So I think colouring in this embossing folder this way would look brilliant with other sort of colour combinations. Obviously it looks quite realistic here using those sort of green colours, but I think if you were to use sort of a different colour palette, I think it would work just as well. So there we've got our background all finished. So I want to do something just to make the background of our card just a little bit more interesting. So my final card size is going to be 7 by 5 inch. So what I'm going to do is just cut off this white sort of border that you get around the embossing folder. So I'm just going to cut that off here, and then that will sort of fit perfectly onto our card. So once we've done that, I'm actually going to cut our background panel down again, and I'm going to create 4 3cm strips. So when we pop this onto our blank card base, we're actually going to have a thin white gap between each of the strips, and this will just give our background a slightly different look. So again, using your embossing folder in a different way to give you sort of a different background effect. So I'm going to use some double-sided tape to adhere my strips onto my blank card base. Because it's an embossed image, obviously I want to make sure that I get every area stuck down as well as possible. So to start with, I'm just placing the bottom strip down, and then I'll be putting the top strip down. So I've done this so I can get sort of the placement of my strips in the right place to begin with. Then I can kind of adjust my strips in the middle to get the right amount of white gap in between them. So it just means then that I'm not going to have one end that's sort of where I want it to be and the other end sort of off-centered, or where I've perhaps not left enough gap when I've put down my center pieces. So again, just sticking this down with some double-sided tape. You can see I'm roughly sort of layering out my middle strips, but like I said, I'm more worried about getting it sort of all in line, but then also in line with the top of the card. I really love how the background of this card is looking. I think it's got that really fantastic tropical feel to it. I think it's nice being able to use an embossing folder in a different way, so where we've coloured our images in, but then also using that background panel in a different way by cutting them into strips. It just gives it just something a little bit different, and I think it just works really well with an image like this because they're quite big. By cutting it up, you're not losing any detail. Yeah, I just think it looks really good, and I think we'll get a really good card from this background. So now we've got our background all finished, we can pop this to one side while we get started on our stamped images and our sentiment. So I'm going to be using a bunch of the stamps from the free stamp set that comes with this month's magazine. So we're going to use the hibiscus flower, the leaf, we're going to use the hummingbird, and that sort of branch of sort of cherry blossom. So I'm going to be using my stamping platform instead of my acrylic block because I want to just have the ease of stamping a bunch of these stamps at the same time. I'm also going to then multiple stamp a couple of them, so we have a couple of sort of options to be able to put onto the front of our card. So when we come to look at how we're going to design it, we've got sort of enough images there to be able to create a really nice full image. If you are looking to multi-stamp your images, having a stamping platform is perfect because, like I said, it means then that you can stamp a whole bunch of them at the same time, and you can obviously stamp them a couple of times if you need to, but it just means that you don't have to sort of spend a lot of time changing your stamps on your acrylic block. You can just pop them all into your stamping platform and stamp all 4 of these images all in one go. So now I've got all my images stamped out, I'm going to use my Spectrum Noir Tri-Blend markers to colour these images in. So again, like the other cards I've made using this stamp set and embossing folder, I'm just going to use really sort of bright colours so it is sort of a nice and tropical theme. So when it comes to colouring in the hummingbird, I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. So you can see that I just sort of bring up an image on my phone, and I'm going to copy that using my Tri-Blend markers. So I actually really love the way that this hummingbird came out. I think it looked super realistic, and it just goes to show how easy it is to blend with these markers, not only blending with the sort of same colour, but also then blending into other colours. So I was trying to copy sort of the markings and the colours that was in this photograph. So I go from that purple, I use then the blue, and then go into that sort of turquoise jade colour. And again, I think this worked really well. It's not something that I tried doing, blending sort of different colours together. I tend to obviously just stick to sort of one colour, blending it together. But I was really surprised at just how easy it was, and really why I hadn't done it any sooner. So the last stamped images we've got to colour in is just these sort of cherry blossom branches. Again, it's going to go very simple. So we've got the sort of brown of the branch, and then I'm going to use just a light purple to colour in these flowers because we've got a lot of other bright colours. I don't need it to be sort of as bright. So once I've finished colouring in these images, we're going to go ahead and start to put in everything together. The first thing I'm going to work on is a sentiment and a green circle just to give our card a little bit extra. And we're going to then place all of these sort of images around this circle. So I've cut this using a die, so it's just a regular die with a stitched sort of detail around the edge, and I've just used my anti-static tool, and we're going to be using one of these sentiments from the stamp set, so this is the hello, and we're going to heat emboss this. So I'm just going to use my clear sticky ink pad, and I'm just going to put this sort of over to the right hand side because I know that I want to use my stamped and coloured images sort of around the left hand side of this circle. So I'm just going to heat emboss this with some white embossing powder. So this is a new embossing powder that I've got. This is the Dixie Sweet, and this is a really ultra fine embossing powder. So the one I've got by Paper Mania, I wondered if I wasn't getting sort of the cleanest embossed images because it was sort of a little bit chunkier in the size of the actual embossing powder itself. So I decided to purchase an ultra fine just to see if it made a difference with those sort of finer sentiments, so that finer font. I'm still sort of working my way through my stamped images just to see how this sort of differs from my other embossing powder, and so far I think it is sort of working slightly better, like I said, for those sort of finer sentiments. So normally I would use my stamping platform when it comes to heat embossing because I want to make sure that I cover sort of every area of the stamped image and to make sure I get a really nice impression. So because I used my acrylic block, I didn't really get that with this particular sentiment. So all I've done is just gone over it with a white gel pen, and this kind of fills in those areas that you didn't quite catch with the embossing powder. So I think this is a really good little sort of cheat, if you like. If you don't quite get that perfect result that you were looking for, then sort of going over it with a white gel pen might just help, like I said, kind of fill in some of those white gaps, and you can really tell the difference from the H to the rest of the letters. It just looks a lot brighter and it looks a lot more filled in. So when I'm happy with my sentiment, I just go ahead and stick that to the center of my card. Then I can go ahead and start trying to work out the placement of my stamped images. So with this month's free gift, it does come with 2 coordinating dies, one for the hibiscus and one for the leaves. You will notice that the other stamped images are cut out. So I actually popped all of these images through my brother's scan and cut machine, and it just cut them all out nicely with that sort of white border around the edge. I'm no good at fussy cutting, and it was just a lot quicker just to pop it all through and have it cut pretty much straight away. So you can see that I'm just sort of filling in these green sort of empty spaces. I do end up using a couple more stamped leaf images. So I do try these embossed, which I used in my last video, but I decided not to use those after all. I just went ahead with a couple of these sort of standard leaves. What I love about this design is it looks like we are sort of framing this green circle. I think it looks really nice. I think I like having it all together, sort of kind of bunching the images together like this, because it creates a really sort of realistic topper, if you like. So once I'm happy with my design, I can go ahead and adhere all of these images down. So I'm going to use a combination of wet glue and some foam pads just to give the card a little bit of dimension. I really love how this card has come together. I think it looks perfect. Like I said, I love that sort of frame that we've created, and I think those sort of blossom branches, I think they work really well to be able to frame sort of images, and I think you could create some really great sort of wreaths with those images as well. So I might possibly give that a try on a future card. But I just think that the whole sort of set works together perfectly, obviously as we'd expect it to, but I just think it does give that really sort of great tropical theme. And the fact that then we've got our background is sort of those green shades, and they sort of blend really nicely with what we've got in the foreground, but having those really bright flowers and that bright hummingbird, I think it really gives the card a little bit of a pop, and I think it finishes it off really nicely. So you can see here, this is our final card, and like I said, I really like it. I think it's come together really beautifully, and I've just added a couple of those sort of gem drops just to fill in a little bit more of that sort of green space that we've got going on. So I want to show you a couple of other cards that I've created using this stamp set and the embossing folder. So the first one I'm going to show you, I've used watercolour, so it's going to look a little different to obviously how we've staged these kind of tropical images in that very sort of traditional tropical colour palette. So here you can see we've just created a black striped watercolour background, and to create the actual flowers and leaves themselves, I've actually sort of put down my watercolour first onto some watercolour cardstock, and I've sort of built up that layer and those colours. Then I've stamped the image and cut them from there. So you can see we've got some sections which are still white, which I really like, and others sort of give you a little bit more depth of colour. So to add a little bit more interest, I've just used a white gel pen to go over a few details just to kind of help them stand out a little bit more. And again, I've done the same with those green leaves as well. I popped that colour down first, then stamped my image just in some waterproof ink, and then I just used the coordinating dies to cut that out. So again, it's using the same sort of stamped images, but again, just changing how you use them with the colours and the sort of type of background you use can give you sort of a different look to those same images. The next card I'm going to share with you is something quite new for me. It's not a design that I've tried out before, but I have seen lots of designs sort of like this, and I have always liked the look of them. So I sort of came across just this piece of acetate. It was something that I had in my scraps, and I just wondered what it would be like going through an embossing folder, and it actually worked really, really well. So what I did is I took a 7x5" top folding blank card base, and I chopped sort of the top maybe 3/4 of it off, and I just left myself with a tab at the top where I was able to attach the acetate. And then I created this sort of strip at the bottom just to help stabilize it and mean that it could actually stand up. One of the problems that I came across is the acetate probably wasn't thick enough, and it doesn't quite support itself. It's sort of, when you stand it up, it's a little bit bowed. So I would recommend using a thicker acetate if you are going to do something like this. But in terms of putting it through that embossing folder, I think it worked really well. There was no cracking, nothing like that. I also mixed this stamp set with a paper pad that I already had in my stash, and it is very much tropical themed, and I think it works really well with this. It sort of is a little bit dark in colour in comparison to the images and the way that I've coloured them in. I think I could have gone for something a little bit brighter just to sort of go with that tropical theme, but I'm really happy with the way this card came out, especially the fact that I hadn't done sort of one in this design before, but it is one that I will try again and hopefully get a better result with. So those are a few of the cards that I've created using this free, totally tropical stamp set and embossing folder. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope I've given you, again, a little bit more inspiration on what you can do with this particular stamp set. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any future videos or any other videos that I post in regards to this particular stamp set. So thanks very much for watching, and happy crafting.